Back in October of 2019, I've made top 10 worst Thompson Friends episodes, and there are two main problems I have for that video. First off, I didn't have iMovie around the time to make that video, so there's no good number transitions and there's no music throughout that video. I've been thinking if I should remake this list or not, but eventually I've decided, yes, I should remake this video. So this is my top 10 worst Thompson Friends episodes, the remake. Rules for this list is that episodes from Season 6 and Season 7 of the Classic era will be on here, episodes for Season 9, 10, and 11 of the Hit era will be on here, and some episodes from the Sharon Miller era will also be on this list. So that means episodes from Season 1 to 5 of the Classic era and episodes from the Big World Big Adventures era won't be on this list. And keep in mind, I do not hate Thompson Friends, and these are my opinions. With all that out of the way, let's get started.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
The Old Bridge. Should I really explain why this episode is terrible? I mean, it's pretty obvious. In this episode, Skarloey is afraid of the old bridge, but eventually he gets over his fear when he helps Rheneas cross the old bridge. The main problem this episode has is that Skarloey is out of character. He is afraid of the old bridge even though he's been brave before. This is literally the same engine who managed to get passengers home on one gear back in Season 4. Honestly, I feel like the right character that should have been used in this episode should have been Pure Sam, or maybe this could have been a flashback story on how Skarloey managed to become brave. Overall, this episode just wasn't good, but don't worry, we're just getting started.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Rusty saves the day. In this episode, Rusty wants to repair Rheneas and Skarloey's line. Okay, here's the main problems this episode has. First off, since when does Rheneas and Skarloey have their own line? And since when does the Skarloey Railway needs repairs? Back in Season 4, the line was just okay. It feels like Sora's history was just rewritten for this episode. Also, Rusty is a maintenance diesel. He's supposed to repair lines. This episode's only low on the list though because I don't think this is the worst episode ever, but it's still bad.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Buffer Bogger. So in this episode, Ben needs to get new buffers and Bill's upset that he doesn't get new buffers either. So there's a main problem this episode has. Okay, two main problems, but still. First off, the whole episode is just Bill complaining about needing new buffers. Who cares? The second problem this episode has is that this is the only time where Ben ever has those new buffers. So what was the point of it? Now, this episode wasn't as terrible as I originally thought, but still bad.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Solar Surprise Day. So in this episode, Gordon thinks Solar Surprise Day is a silly day, but Thomas wants to prove to him that it's not. So easily the worst part of this episode has to be the Brendam dock scene, in which Thomas whistles so loudly Cranky drops a box, which causes fireworks to go set off. And that could have easily injured someone, or maybe killed someone, and Thomas doesn't get any punishment in the end for that. What else could I really say about this episode? It was just terrible.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Fiery Flynn. In this episode, a blue engine's firebox is on fire, and Flynn leaves immediately before he even knows which engine it is. And he ends up spraying Edward and Gordon, mistaking them for being the blue engine who is on fire. Okay, here's the first problem. Is Flynn blind or something? Because he should know what fire looks like. He should see that Edward and Gordon are not on fire. The second problem this episode has is the line, his firebox is on fire. It's a firebox. It's supposed to have fire, so it'll warm up the boiler to help Thomas start up. I mean, that has to be the dumbest line ever. What else could I really say about this episode? It was just terrible.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Skarloey the Brave. In this episode, Skarloey wants to prove to Rheneas and Duncan that he is a brave engine. Now, like with the old bridge, Skarloey is out of character here, but this episode somehow makes him out of character way more worse than how he was in the old bridge. Skarloey was brave before in season 4 and 5 of the classic era, but the hit era completely turned him into a childish idiot. Not even to mention the fact that Skarloey dangerously went up the incline. Also, what was the point of Thomas's cameo? Like, he didn't serve a purpose in this episode.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Don't be silly, Billy. I'll make this one quick since I don't have that much to say about it. So, in this episode, an engine named Billy has arrived on Sodor, and he doesn't want to listen to what Thomas tells him to do and keeps calling him a bossy engine, which got really annoying really fast. Obviously, the main problem this episode has is Billy. He was really annoying here, and I'm glad he didn't appear in any more episodes ever since this one. Fun fact is that he was meant to return in the episode Splish Splash Splosh, but he got replaced by Charlie in the final version. If there's anything which I like about Billy, it would be that he's painted orange, since there's not really that much characters that are orange in the show, besides Rusty, Nia, and Terrence. Overall, this episode wasn't good, and I said I'll make this one quick.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Well, we only have 3 more episodes left, and in my opinion, these last 3 episodes are the absolute worst episodes of Thomas and Friends. So the first one up, Edward Strikes Out. In this episode, a new crane called Rocky has arrived on Sodor, and Edward and Gordon call him a newfangled nonsense. So here's the first problem this episode has. Gordon complains about how Rocky doesn't have an engine and he cannot move on its own. Well, the same thing goes with the breakdown train, but he didn't complain about that. The second problem this episode has is that when Gordon crashes into the pipes, the narrator says that he was going fast. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because why was he going fast? He wasn't pulling the express. And the third problem this episode has is Edward is out of character here. Seriously, he calls Rocky a newfangled nonsense and doesn't want him to clean up the pipes, and instead gets Harvey to help, but eventually he decided that he should get Rocky. This episode wasn't great at all.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Now on to one of the most infamous episodes of the show, Wonky Whistle. This episode was number 4 on my original worst list, but I decided to make this my number 2 spot instead. So you're probably wondering what makes this episode so infamous. Well, the scene of Thomas leaving the steamworks while the workmen were still fixing his whistle and they ended up falling off, that's what makes this episode so infamous. Now, I do agree what Thomas did was wrong. He could have injured one of those workmen, like what could have happened in the episode Sodor Surprise Day. Anyways, the main plot is that Thomas has to take some animals to the country show, but the animals keep escaping the van whenever Thomas whistles due to his whistle being wonky. Thomas soon gets his whistle fixed and he managed to get all the animals back. I agree that this episode is terrible, and some people actually consider this to be the absolute worst episode of the show. While I do agree it's bad, I don't think this is the absolute worst. There's actually another episode which I personally think is the worst of the show. Now you're probably wondering what episode is way more worse than Wonky Whistle.
He dangled dangerously above the water. Help!
Middle Engine. Oh boy, this episode. In this episode, Ari and Bert made Percy a middle engine by putting trucks in front of him, and then they do the same thing with James later on. Here's the main problems this episode has. First off, Sir Topham Hatt. He blames Percy for going under the loading ramp when obviously it was Henry's fault. I mean, it's not like Percy decided to go underneath the loading ramp. The second problem this episode has is that Ari and Bert get away with what they do in this episode. I mean, they cause a lot of trouble, yet they don't get any punishment in the end. Why? Also, Percy does nothing wrong in the beginning of this episode to become a middle engine. In my opinion, this is the absolute worst episode I've ever seen in the show. However, based on how the show is going to look in season 25, I'll rather take this episode over season 25. Anyways, yeah, we might get bad episodes here and there, such as Wonky Whistle, Edward Strikes Out, Up in the Way, and Don't Be Silly Billy, but there's also been great episodes such as Escape, Toby and the Flood, and Toast Stands By. Those episodes in which are in my top 10 favorite Thomas Friends episodes of all time. Like what I said at the beginning of this video, I do not hate Thomas and Friends, and these are my opinions. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. My next review is going to be on an SML character. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next review.